Welcome to Regulated Roots, the series that takes you behind the scenes of the cannabis industry's most influential brands and talented minds behind them. I'm your host, Kimberly Simms, and today I am here with not one, but two amazing women in the cannabis industry, Courtney Caron and Lauren Fontein, and both are co-owners of the artistry as well as fellow attorneys, and I'm so excited to have them here today. We are going to dive into one of the more exciting and I think often misunderstood, even by me to some extent, facets of the industry, which is consumption lounges. As more and more states legalize cannabis. That cannabis California continues to lead the way with its unique and innovative approaches. And what I want to talk about today is, what exactly is a consumption lounge and how it differs from a traditional retail store, and why these spaces matter so much for consumers as well as the industry as a whole. So we will break down some of the key differences between a retail dispensary and consumption lounge, as well as dive into some of the challenges that have been faced by operators, as well as why it's so crucial to have these types of spaces to foster community within our industry. So sit back and relax, light something up if you've got it, and let's dive into the world of consumption lounges. So first, I would just love for you guys to introduce yourselves, as well as introducing the audience to the artistry and its genesis and how it came about, because it is a really unique concept that I haven't seen anyone else come close to even attempting to replicate it in California. It's a really special concept. So introduce yourselves as well as the artistry, please.
Sure.
Lauren, why don't you go first?
Okay, I'll start. So I'm Lauren Fontein. I'm one of the founders of the artistry. I serve as our chief compliance counsel. Chief compliance officer. So essentially, I'm like our general counsel, and I handle a lot of our legal work. And the artistry is a retail and lounge brand in California that we started in 2018. And the real genesis of it was because we wanted to start a consumption lounge. So with adult use being legalized in California, a lot of different cities were now permitting new retail stores to open. And in West Hollywood, they were allowing people to apply for a consumption lounge license. And that was really unique because there had been nothing like that anywhere in SoCal. And so my partners and I had been in the cannabis space for several years, operating medical dispensaries. And we were really excited about being able to open not just a new store, but a consumption space that could be like any other type of cool hospitality venue in the area. So we envisioned a place where there could be live entertainment, there could be dining, and of course, cannabis alongside all of it. And we wanted to come up with a concept that really resonated with people in the area and also with the city of West Hollywood, because they were looking for someone to come up with this creative, unique business model. And that's how we came up with the idea for the artistry, which is an art-focused business. So in our retail and in our lounge space, there's a huge focus on featuring art from local artists. And we have a lot of art on the walls. All of the art is for sale by the artists, and all of the proceeds from those sales goes directly to the artists. And then in the consumption area, we have also a lot of performing artists that are featured there. So like I mentioned, we have music, we have comedy nights, drag shows, a lot of different ways to really highlight the connection between art and cannabis. And we felt like this would be the perfect pairing because what do people like to do when they're going to a concert or enjoying an art exhibit, or, they like to smoke. And so, you could never really do that legally anywhere up until this point. And now we had this fun opportunity to be able to create a space where people could do that. And so, you mentioned like, what's the difference between a retail store and a consumption space? So in most cities in California, retailers are not allowed to have on-site consumption. And it's up to cities to decide whether or not they want to allow consumption on site. But there's only a handful of cities right now in the state that do allow that. And WeHo, was one of the first to do that. So the consumption lounge means that we can actually have a part of our premises where people can consume cannabis on site. And it does have to be separated from the retail area. So now we have 9 artistry retail stores and 2 consumption lounges throughout California.
That's so awesome. I love it. Courtney, jump on in and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, please.
Sure. So I'm Courtney. I'm the founder of Adamant Law Group, which is a law practice focused solely on the cannabis industry with a little dabbling in the music industry, which is where I was practicing prior to joining the cannabis industry. And through my law practice, I met Lauren during the early stages of the West Hollywood licensing program, and joined the artistry team, which at that time wasn't called the artistry. We were just some like-minded individuals who were looking for an opportunity to work together, and the artistry was born. And through that application process, I really fell in love with not only the team behind the artistry, but this concept that was being developed to bring something truly unique to the cannabis industry, which at the time on the recreational side was very new. And while the owners of the original founding members of the artistry had been involved with the cannabis industry for many years, this whole recreational side was something that was very new. And so after working with Lauren and some of our other partners for a couple of years, and because they would often say, we think you really love the artistry more than we do, which I don't actually believe, but they would like to joke a lot because I really fell in love with everything that they were doing and the concept itself. I put in a request to be part of the ownership team, and we were able to make that happen. And so now I feel very thankful to be part of that team and working with the artistry on our expansion, in California and hopefully beyond California, to bring this art-centered cannabis concept to other communities so that we can both normalize the use of cannabis, but provide such a unique opportunity for other people to experience cannabis and art, which we feel are very synergistic in nature.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I'm certainly my most creative and thoughtful during consumption. That's for sure. Amazing. So I think back to, my experience as an attorney and a consumer, and I went to my first consumption lounge in San Francisco, but I think it was most certainly before 2018. And obviously, we know the Bay Area was always ahead of the rest of the state in its local regulations. But I just, it was the old Spark location, and I remember seeing such a future in that moment and thinking, this is the future of cannabis. We're going to have, dispensaries with the ability to have on-site consumption. And, is it a few years away? Is it a decade away? I don't know. But I fell in love with the experience and thought, like, wow, I would rather come here than a bar any day of the week. And I really thought that we would see more in Southern California. But to your point, it took quite some time for us to get there.
And it's still quite limited even now.
I mean, and I'm based in San Diego. We don't have anything of that nature here. I know our city council's been talking about it, but I don't, we'll see. Maybe the artistry will come to San Diego, which would be so wonderful. A girl can dream. But what I think, I would love for us to talk about, and I know that when we were chatting the other week, we all sort of shared the same sentiment as to like what we thought a consumption lounge would be or could be early on versus what it actually is. And, I'd love for you guys to talk about that, not just from a practical perspective, right? Like, I imagined it would be like I could order off a menu. I could order like an infused
steak
meal
with it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I was really excited for that type of experience. So can you shed some light on, like, what did you guys think it was going to be versus what it really is, and some of the regulatory, this is a legal show. So of course we want to talk about culture and experience, but we also want to focus on the legalities of it. And so, why it turned into what it is, just in terms of packaging and labeling and testing and some of those regulatory issues that ultimately shaped the way that consumption lounges are today.
So I'll touch on the application part of it first, but I think Lauren can really share a unique perspective because she was on the ground as the lounge was actually opening and how everything actually had to roll out once the legislation was changing. So when we received the first application, there really were no law, and I'm speaking about West Hollywood specifically,
Sure.
There really were no local regulations in place for consumption other than to suggest that consumption was going to be allowed. And of course, at the state level, it was pretty pretty limited at that particular point. And
for
so
sure.
the sky was the limit on the application process. And if you go back and review the West Hollywood applications that came in for folks who were interested in the cannabis consumption side of things, it had a variety of different concepts of what people wanted, much like you were explaining, from a restaurant where you would, purchase infused foods and they would be served directly to a table, to the concept of having a spa-like place where you would be smoking and both drinking and using different body type treatments that were all cannabis infused in some way. And then as the licensing process took, I would say probably 6 to 8 months to get through, during that time frame, you started to see some framework come into place in relationship to cannabis consumption. And the early stages of the cannabis consumption framework did not allow for this on-site preparation of food. And it certainly did not allow for you to be served cannabis that was already opened or, not measured out in a specific way where the consumer would be in control of what it is that they were consuming.
That was in place when we applied. Just other people seem to misunderstand the rules, but we always knew that you wouldn't be able to infuse things on site because the state had already released its regulations, which require all cannabis to be individually dosed and packaged, and it can only be sold to a customer in that format. And so I think there was a misunderstanding by many other applicants that they thought they would somehow be able to do on-site infusion, but we realized that when we applied.
A licensee that was doing that for some time, though. So how?
They were not ever infusing the food items on site. So I think that there was confusion because everything was new and changing. So the rules never allowed for the cannabis to be added to food or beverages on site by the business. The only cannabis that could be sold is the same type of cannabis that's sold at a retail business. The thing that changed was that businesses, there was no rule regarding whether you could sell non-cannabis items when we applied. So that just wasn't addressed by the regulations. And then after West Hollywood released the results, but before we opened, the rule that changed was that cannabis businesses couldn't sell non-cannabis goods. So you couldn't sell non-infused food. And so that's where that was a change for people, because even people thought they could operate a restaurant and I could sell you, a cheeseburger with no cannabis, but at least my lounge could be selling food. But actually that wasn't even allowed anymore under state law. And so that, challenged a lot of people into, figuring out, well, is this even a viable business model if I thought I was opening this consumption lounge and I was going to be able to make money off of food and beverage sales, if I'm really just relying on cannabis, itself. But there, then were workarounds like what you're talking about. That OG Cafe, for instance, has a restaurant, and it's technically a separate business that can sell food, but
with like a separate premise
while you're sitting at the table in OG Cafe, and that's the workaround with Irie too. But it is a lot more difficult, which is why many of the other lounge licensees didn't end up opening, or still have been waiting to figure out how it's all going to pan out. And we had to kind of change our original plans as well. And then now, I'm sure you're going to ask.
We're going to talk about
now
it.
There's going to be a change to that regulation in a positive way that's going to now allow us to do what we thought we'd be able to do at the beginning, which is sell non-cannabis food and beverage.
So I would imagine then when some of this started to actually become more clarified, and you and others realized that you wouldn't necessarily be able to your point, in the same premise, sell a burger or, appetizer.
A water. You could.
A water. Yeah, a water. How did that change your model as well as your financial projections? Because we all know, anyone who's tuning in, I would assume, knows that this industry has, a reputation outside of the industry for being this, money-making machine. The reality is the margins are really slim. So how did, when this all cleared away and you realized, okay, wait, we can't actually do what we thought, how did you guys pivot and work around that to achieve your
the immediate workaround was to locate an outside restaurant that you could put a QR code on your table and be able to have food brought in to your venue.
That's no, as far as
you. And
I mean, but going before that though, the pivot was we decided not to rent a space that was a restaurant with a kitchen, right? Like we assumed we'd be building out a kitchen. This also was happening during COVID period. So like everything was wonky with hospitality. So it was, a challenging time, which is another reason why these other licensees have delayed. But so we were like put in this position where we didn't know if the law was going to change, if we should move forward with our lounge at all. Like this is kind of weird, with COVID. Are people going to even want to go to a place where you're smoking and breathing? This is when we were wearing masks and you weren't blowing out birthday candles, and like times were weird.
I think that's like now when I think about it, I'm like, wait. Like, I don't hate that. Like, let's not have a child blow on a cake or
Yeah. So when we opened the lounge, it was 2021. So it was still, there was that sensitivity. So just like smoking and exhaling in public felt like very risky at the time. Right. But we had to figure out as operators, are we going to try and build a space that also has a kitchen and figure out a way to somehow bifurcate it, like what OG Cannabis Cafe did? Or should we just assume this is what we're dealing with and, have a lounge focus on like cannabis offerings? And that's what we ended up doing. So, even though in our application for our West Hollywood project, we had this vision that included an integrated restaurant, when we opened the lounge in West Hollywood, we opted to build out the space without a kitchen and to do what Courtney said, which is to partner with nearby restaurants who could essentially deliver food. But if the law had been different, we probably wouldn't have built out the space that way. And also, Lauren, COVID made it very risky to be putting money into a restaurant build out. So it was all like, the times and everything changing. And then now with our Hawthorne Lounge, then we were a few years out and we did feel like that law was going to change in the near future. So with that actual property, we sought out a space where we knew that we could have an on-site kitchen because it felt like, this bill had come forward. Now this was the third time, so it felt like finally there was going to be enough momentum to change after all that time. But when we were opening the WeHo Lounge, it didn't feel like that, and so now those two spaces are different, and one has a kitchen section and one does not because of all of that.
Lauren, how did that? I don't. One question Kim asked, but I actually don't remember this part of it. But how did that change our financial projections from what we thought that the WeHo Lounge would be to what it actually ended up being without that food service? Do you have any recollection of that?
Yeah, I think that our average per customer spend was a lot lower than we would have projected because we couldn't take advantage of that additional food and beverage sales. So even with the food partners that we had, maybe we were getting some small cut, but it was not, substantial and really didn't make up for the cost of administering the whole program actually. And so, so the lounge became, not nearly as profitable as we thought it would be as an aspect of the business, but more ancillary to the dispensary business. And so that, that's another huge challenge that I think lounge operators are still facing now is how do you monetize the lounge business and really make it pay, because it requires a lot of additional expenses over retail as far as the additional staff, the insurance. We have to have special insurance for on-site consumption, additional security, all of that. But people are coming into the lounge and actually spending less per visit than when they shop with us because they don't need a lot of product or they can
and the cost of the real estate. I mean, just having that extra real estate of that building is pretty
so walk me through the experience. So I come in, I'm a customer, and I decide I want to purchase some edibles maybe and some pre-rolls, and then I can take that product that I've already purchased and then I can go over and consume it in your lounge.
You can do what I purchased.
one way. That's one option.
That's one option. The other option is you can go directly into the lounge and you'll have a server that can take your order and can bring you products to your table.
Oh, okay. So you can, it can be more like a restaurant, but you're right. If I'm going there as like my, once a month, like I'm going and stocking up versus I'm coming with friends, I'm going to spend, it's like grocery store versus restaurant, right? I mean,
I've never done it the way that you described, Kim, where I go downstairs and buy product and then I go up to the lounge. I have always just gone to the lounge as that is my purpose for heading there for the day with friends. And then I'll sit down and the server will bring me water and a menu. And then the menu is pretty extensive. But yes, I would not likely be buying everything I would be stocking up with in the retail store at that particular moment. I may buy a pre-roll. I may buy, well, my favorite is our cannabis cocktails. They're not only beautiful, but they're delicious and they're really fun. And we've developed something very special with what we serve for cannabis cocktails. So I typically get that. And then there's, obviously some pre-rolls at the table that, or some, we've never rolled them ourselves. We usually just buy the pre-rolls because there's such a great selection of them, but certainly you could roll your own and then enjoy that experience. You could certainly go back downstairs and purchase products on your way out, because the way ours is set up is when you come in, you are walking into the dispensary and you could take the stairs or an elevator upstairs to the lounge. But I typically, when I'm going for the lounge experience, purchase upstairs. And that's why I think Lauren is saying that the spend can be less, because a lot of people aren't necessarily stocking up when they come in at that particular moment. They're coming for the lounge experience.
Yeah. And so two things. So we learned that what Kimberly does is actually what most people do. And we thought a lot of people would come just for the lounge, but the people that come just for the lounge aren't spending as much. But the other real challenge is that we're not able to upcharge the way a restaurant or a bar would be on cannabis, just based on what we've learned off of consumer behavior. And I think it's because people just aren't used to this business model, right? Like you're willing to go into a restaurant and spend like $17 on a cocktail, or but you could, or whatever, $12 on a bottle of beer that you could buy for $2 at the grocery store. But we're selling the things for the same price in the retail space and in the lounge. There's a real price sensitivity among cannabis consumers, and it was just hard for people to wrap their heads around having to pay a premium, even though they're in the lounge setting. And we experimented with having like a cover charge early on, and there was a lot of pushback on that. But so then it's like, if you're going to shop downstairs and then you're going to just go sit in the lounge and smoke it, how do we cover the expense of the lounge part? Because you're just doing the same thing as every other, retail customer did, but now it just has an added cost to us. Unless we can find a way to, use the lounge as a way to just pull more people in the door total. So we have more retail customers, a bigger group of total customers, or, find a way to encourage people to buy more because they're going to smoke some upstairs, or add on something like a cannabis cocktail or a device rental once they get to the lounge.
I want to talk about the cocktails for a little bit, because, again, one of the things that I had mentioned that I envisioned that this would look like as I go, I open my menu. Now I'm ordering my meal, my cocktail. But again, we know we can't do that because of some of our rules on, packaging and final form. So how are you serving a cocktail and making sure that the consumer is controlling the dosage? So what does that experience look like?
The cocktails that I have ordered, I'm served a beautiful beverage, which is of course unmedicated. So it's just whatever the flavors are that I've ordered. Let's say a virgin Mai Tai is essentially what I would be receiving. And then I'm served a small vial of a tincture, and I can add that tincture there are several doses available. I typically buy the lowest dosage there is, and then you control how much of that you want to pour into your cocktail and you mix it. So there is no mixing that happens prior to receiving that at my table.
Awesome.
In special events that Lauren and I have done together, like our high teas, sometimes the tea is infused itself, but again, you are in control of your actual tea bag that you're utilizing, or maybe it's a honey stick or a tincture. And so each one of those items is an individual sealed dose that the consumer is then responsible for utilizing, so that they can control the consumption amount that they are looking to, ingest that day.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, I just think since there are so few consumption lounges, I feel like even people that are entrenched in the industry don't fully understand, or they have a difficult time visualizing what the experience would be like. So I appreciate you guys sharing the insight into that. So I mean, I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit. But if there's anything else that you want to add, I would love to hear, what, and again, you may have we've kind of already talked about it a little bit, but some of the challenges that the consumption lounge faces that are different than regular retail. And this can be, maybe we switch gears, because I think we've touched on it a little bit already from, the practical side, but how about from like a legal side, a liability side? Like, how are we making sure that those that are coming to our consumption lounge are safe when they're leaving? What does that look like for you? Because again, it's more akin to a bar than, a traditional dispensary. So what, again, continuing to talk about some of the challenges that are different than a typical dispensary. I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
So yeah, I talked about kind of like the financial challenges, but then there is, operationally, fortunately, cannabis consumers are generally, better behaved and, safer, in my opinion, than alcohol consumers at a bar can be. And we've experienced this, right? And so I think that it's important for people to realize that, because we talked about how, there's very few lounges because most cities are still wary of allowing consumption lounges in their neighborhood, like San Diego, even though they aren't inherently unsafe in any way, but there's still this, public safety concern that somehow having these smoking spaces is going to cause problems, or people being rowdy out on the street, or it's going to smell bad or whatever. And so, we really have to work to fight that misconception, which we have really tried to do in our lounge spaces by creating these spaces that look nice and feel very safe and warm and welcoming and feel just like any other, restaurant in WeHo, and getting people to see oh my gosh, I can come in this space and people are hanging out and they're not falling on the floor or, doing crazy things.
Sticky.
This is actually a viable alternative for a lot of people who, like you said, before, I'd way rather be here than a bar. It's actually not as crazy and loud and whatever. It's actually more peaceful and relaxing and fun to be in that atmosphere. But there are challenges as far as, insurance is difficult and expensive, as is all insurance right now. So, but we have to get special insurance for this on-site consumption. There aren't a lot of companies that even provide it. Part of our policy requires that the only products that people can consume are things that we sell that go through our POS and metric. So we have to make sure, and this has been a challenge, that people don't try and bring in other products to consume on site, or nicotine. A lot of people were trying to roll spliffs, and we had to police that a lot, and just say, no, that's not allowed. And make sure they were buying things from us, which you'd think would be kind of obvious. You don't go into a bar and try and bring your
own beer.
But a lot of people push back on that. So that's another thing. Cannabis culture is kind of wild and different, and people were upset that they couldn't just bring their own stuff and show up and smoke it. But that kind of defeats having that as a business model. But so that, just educating people on the policies and enforcing it can be a challenge. And then we do have to be careful that there's not overconsumption. There's this new product called Undo. I don't know if you've heard about it, but somebody actually created a product that's supposed to undo the high. And so we have that now at our lounges.
I'm sorry, slightly off topic. Have you guys experimented with this product?
I haven't tried it.
I haven't used it. This is the first time hearing of it.
I should just do a test where I get really high and let us know how it works.
I mean, that's
it's supposed to help a lot with if you have the mind high or paranoia, or you're just feeling really overwhelmed. It doesn't completely make you sober immediately, but I have heard that it works well. But we do have problems with people, especially if with dabs. I've seen it a lot where people just don't understand. So, first and foremost, we want to make sure that they understand what they're consuming, and if they're a newbie, try and guide them towards low dose things, or starting slowly. But it still happens, right? And so we have protocols for things that we do, including giving them CBD, because that can help. Giving them, water, making sure they have a safe place if they need to lie down, if they need to get assistance getting home safely, we can help with all of that. And so, we've had to deal with that. Luckily, it hasn't been, a major problem. And, first, our line of defense is just our servers, like really helping to monitor their guest behavior and, help them to consume safely. But we can't control everything. So it's interesting, but like I started saying, it's just, I mean, I can't imagine like operating a bar, because I've seen so many crazy things like going out, and behavior. It's nothing like that in the cannabis space. Like Courtney, people are just happy and chill, and nobody's yelling or fighting or anything. So
sometimes my favorite part of the Artistry Lounge is I'll grab my laptop and I'll just, I haven't got to do this as much lately, but early on I would pick this table in the corner outside. I would call that my office. And I would just go there and I would just watch everybody. And it brought so much joy seeing the normalization of smoking cannabis and consuming cannabis in public. But also, as Lauren was saying, this was not a rager. This was people, delightfully enjoying cannabis consumption. And everybody was happy. And some other people would have their laptops. They may be just doing a little work. In fact, I went to Hawthorne with Lauren recently. We were meeting some people there, and I was really happy because the lounge had only been open, I don't know, Lauren, when we went there a few weeks back, it had only been open a few weeks.
It's relatively new, right? So for those who are, we kind of snuck it in there, but at the beginning that the Artistry just opened their second lounge in Hawthorne. So for those who are closer to Hawthorne.
And it was amazing because there was just a group of like young men sitting there with their laptops, smoking. One of them had in some music. You could tell he was just like listening to his own music, and they were just hanging out. And I really love seeing that. I love when we throw the special events that we throw and people come specifically for those. But there is something that just brings a lot of joy in just seeing people peacefully consume cannabis because it is something that they enjoy to do. And that, it's not like going to a bar with like the intent to get smashed. Like it's just something very lovely that we're able to provide. And that is what I see pretty much all of the time.
Like typical clientele. Is it more men and more women? Is it a younger crowd? Does it run the gamut?
It's actually pretty diverse. So we get a lot of older customers. We get a lot of females. We, like Courtney said, during the daytime, there's a lot of people that come in with their laptops and just hang out. And then in the evenings, we get more groups of people. But I love it. I mean, this is just LA in general, right? Like you just see all people from all walks of life. And whenever we have like the paint classes or
tell us about
some of the performances, we have drag shows, we have comedy nights. I don't know. We just get such a great mix of people. And it's not just like who you would think would be coming in, right? The stereotypical stoner, but there's a lot of older people. There's, so it's interesting. And we get a lot of people that aren't like frequent cannabis consumers, but maybe just want to try a beverage or, are sharing something with a friend. So it's not just like, heavy stoners coming in. But I think we have a variety of different types of events to kind of capture, different demographics.
Yeah, I was going to say, Lauren, you've curated a very special group of events that I think helps bring in different people from different walks of life, as you were saying. So Lauren puts a lot of time, I think she's being very modest here, but she has put a lot of time into creating this special environment where there's paint and puff classes and there's comedy night. She and I put on, as I mentioned before, this lovely tea that we is very special to both of us that we get to do a couple of times a year, maybe more in the future. There are drag brunches, which are super fun and energetic. Of course, on like 420, there's a big 420 party, and on 710, the same thing. There are lounge takeovers where different brands will come in and take over the lounge for that day to And then there's private parties. Like we also offer the opportunity for you to rent out the lounge or reserve the lounge to have a private party. So even like the Los Angeles Cannabis Bar Association has come in and, or the Los Angeles Bar Association Cannabis Section, I should say, has come in and, hosted an event at the lounge and is also looking to do something like that again. And so there are a lot of different ways that the lounge, can be utilized in a variety of capacities, which also helps us continue to normalize cannabis use, but to bring in a variety of different people.
That's awesome.
So if you're looking to have a corporate party for the holidays, you can consider the artistry lounges.
There's so many different, there's so many different uses. I don't usually find myself wishing I lived closer to LA, respectfully. But
find us a way into San Diego and we will bring it to you.
Gosh, I would just love that so very much. Okay, we kind of have alluded to change in law, change in regulations. So let's talk about AB 1775 for a couple minutes, and I'll let you guys talk about, you mentioned it's took 3 tries to pass. What is it and how will it change how you're doing business? And I know we chatted about this a little bit too. Is this a change that applies to all dispensaries or just consumption lounges? So will you please kindly educate the listeners or the viewers on what AB 1775 is and how it will alter your operations?
I could give a brief overview, and then Lauren, maybe you could want to touch on the remainder of it. This particular bill has gone through 3 times, as we mentioned, and I think initially the idea they were referring it to like as a cannabis cafe bill. So the idea was that the whole point is to be able to serve food and potentially ticket sales to events like music and whatnot as part of your cannabis consumption lounge. The reason that it was continually voted down were because there are obviously organizations lobbying against it who don't necessarily understand cannabis use, but are also fearful for smoke being inside of facilities where people are spending lengthy periods of time. So like the American Cancer Society played a very big role in lobbying against these particular bills because they had some fear that folks would be having the same effects of secondhand smoke that we understand exist from nicotine in this particular scenario. And so they were fighting against this because they just really didn't want people to be in one particular space for a lengthy period of time. Now a bill is passed that I'll let Lauren talk about a little bit of the bill that is actually in place and how that has changed, a little bit about what we're doing. But essentially we can now prepare food on site, whereas beforehand, the iteration allowed you to sell prepackaged food. So Lauren, why don't you pick up from there and share how that
and let's clarify, infused food or non-infused food? Because I think again, still confusion. I mean, we were all at Benzinga yesterday and did not really see each other as it were. We will rectify that in the future. But I think I was chatting with a couple of different people about this bill, and again, there's still confusion as to what it allows and disallows.
Yeah. So right now, before that bill goes into effect, any cannabis business or a retailer, I guess, can sell prepackaged non-cannabis food and beverage. So we are currently allowed to sell prepackaged items. So we could sell a can of soda. We have snacks.
Any retailer, any licensed dispenser,
candy, bag of chips, whatever.
I, by the way, have not ever noticed. Like, I don't think
most people are doing it, maybe don't even realize, but the lounges are, because they, at least that gave us some way to sell things. And prepackaged could include things we get from a wholesale bakery, like a pre-made panini sandwich or something, right? So we have been able to do things
like a Starbucks kind of.
Yeah,
exactly. Cheese box.
Yeah, we found like a charcuterie supplier, so we have these charcuterie packs, things like that. But because they are technically prepackaged. But so the new law, AB 1775, allows any kind of non-cannabis food or beverage to be sold by a retail business that has on-site consumption. And the reason it's worded like that is because under the state regulations, there's no separate license for a consumption lounge. So any consumption lounge is licensed as a retailer, and then a retailer can have on-site consumption if it's allowed by the city, going back to what I said before. So it's up to cities whether they allow any retailers to also allow on-site consumption. And so in that bill, it allows a retailer to sell food and beverage in the areas where consumption takes place.
So that's an important distinction.
Retailers.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say that is the important distinction, because there has been like a few articles that have come out and some like rumors online circulating that now every retailer in California can have what they're referring to as like a cannabis cafe. And that is absolutely not true. The municipality still has to allow you to have on-site consumption in order for this food preparation and these meals and whatnot to be served. And so the idea that cannabis in California is now going to operate much like these Amsterdam-like cannabis cafes is still the same very narrow group of people who hold a consumption lounge license or a consumption area license that has been issued by their local municipality. So that's the part I think that viewers really have to understand, is that you won't be able to walk into your local retailer and expect to sit down and, purchase a cup of coffee, made fresh for you there. Sure, you can maybe buy a pre-made Starbucks, but in a bottle, but you will not be able to order food in your retail store unless they are also acting as a cannabis consumption lounge by way of the legislation of that local municipality.
So does it still have to be, though, in a separate kitchen that follows all of the, public health department rules? How will you now integrate?
So that would be regulated by the public health department. So the kitchen part of it would be treated like any other restaurant business, right? So you would still have to get health permits from your county and follow all the rules to satisfy all the public health requirements for the kitchen space, and whether or not it needed to be physically separate from the smoking area or not, I guess would depend. I think probably almost always it would, but maybe you could have an open kitchen concept. But yes, you'd still have to go through all the appropriate permitting that would allow you to legally serve food to people.
So will you guys take advantage of that in your WeHo space with the passage of 1775?
This is my dream.
So we looked at we're working.
I want a whole bakery, tea house upstairs. And I keep telling Lauren, I think that we mentioned on our first talk, and you also informed us that you too love baking. Lauren is a ridiculously good baker. I am a little more amateur myself, but still love doing it. And so I have this grandiose, a few years ago, I was bouncing around ideas with Lauren, and she says, I have a great name. And I'm like, well, what is it? And she said, High Tea by the Artistry. And I'm like, that's it. That is exactly what I want the third floor to be, where we could serve tea and coffee and have this amazing little cafe. It's not a giant space up there, but something very sweet and cute like that. And then it just sort of kept getting put aside because there was no legislation that was really helping us achieve that goal. Building commercial kitchens can be quite expensive, and I think that that's what, when I've talked to our other partners about it who think that I'm this big dreamer, they have said, we have to make sure that the return on the investment of building the kitchen actually makes sense for the business. And I always hate those conversations because I look at it more for the fun of it. What can Lauren and I do while we're also being lawyers? How can we channel our inner baking cafe fun that we've always dreamed up being able to have? But, in reality, the cost of doing that may not make sense. So I don't know, Lauren, where we're at on those discussions, but I think that I'm constantly going to be, trying to push this dream upon everybody of having this, beautiful little tea house. It's
a step in the right direction. I think, progress in general is so slow, but in the cannabis industry forever, I've been in the industry, serving the industry since 2009. So that's coming up on 15 years.
Long time.
I feel old. I feel so old. Everything is slow moving and it changes. I also think, just as a note, I think that AB 1775 also sort of enshrined localities' ability to do this, to allow it. I think especially again in Southern California, that's a little bit more conservative. A lot of the municipalities would, when I was doing a little bit more like advocacy work and I guess like a little bit of lobbying, although not in an official lobbying capacity. But when I would speak to city council members, they often would push back and saying like, well, we're just not even really sure what we can or can't do here. Because to your point, consumption lounge is not a separate license. And for all of the hundreds of pages of regulations we have, it didn't really speak to that, which again,
I'm pretty surprised about that, to be honest, that at this point, there hasn't been more carve outs for this. I know one city that was really heavily looking into all of this. I represented somebody there, was in Desert Hot Springs. They were really looking at trying to come up with a consumption model that was beyond just food service. They wanted to, there was a group that I was working with who was really interested in doing like a bowling alley, a big music venue.
How fun.
And really bringing like this whole life to this opportunity. And I think that the passing of this bill could start to push towards that direction. For example, this bill specifically carves out a change of where you can sell tickets for music events, I think is the way that it was listed. And so that is pushing us more towards the direction that we want to go. But there's still this cost return of ROI that's, I think, making it a little bit difficult for people to navigate how to do these really big, grandiose vision projects. Like I still would love for the artistry to have, a West Hollywood music venue that is like the hot spot in town where we're, so that I could also lawyer the music part of it, because of course I came from music. And so I would really love to be able to still do that side of everything, but, have this big music venue where we're able to bring in all these, wonderful acts. And we've looked at partnering with different record labels, and that brings in one other really interesting thing. So like partnerships, because everybody says, well, there are groups that have money. Like, why can't there be, for example, I'll just pick anyone, a Def Jam Music Lounge in West Hollywood. Well, because a lot of these companies are publicly traded, and a lot of these companies are public companies that have investors who are very conservative, or from the federal standpoint, aren't necessarily looking to outwardly support the cannabis industry because it is not federally legal up to this point. And so until I think some of those things change at both the federal level and even at the local level inside California, we're not going to see some of these amazing partnerships that have such viability because of fear still associated with being involved with those types of industry, with this type of industry.
The other big challenge right now is that you cannot have cannabis and alcohol in the same place.
For sure.
So we could legally you could like take over a venue like the Troubadour and just get a cannabis license and sell cannabis, make it a consumption space. And that could be really fun, but then they could no longer sell and serve alcohol at the same time. So this creates a big challenge, like for us to
try a lot of places with liquor licenses. I know like in San Diego, some of our smaller, but really fun music venues, again, same thing that they butt up against the alcohol and I have found that really anyone with a liquor license just does not want to mix.
Exactly. Yes, because their liquor license could be jeopardized. And then on the flip side, if you had a cannabis license and there's alcohol. So there's that right now that I think is going to take a long time to change, unfortunately, in California. And it seems like in other states, they're a little bit more open to this, and maybe even it is allowed in some places to have alcohol and cannabis.
Lauren and I were speaking with somebody yesterday about that in Tennessee. A friend of ours was telling us about how they, on the hemp side, which we would need a whole separate show to discuss, but on the hemp side,
I thought about throwing in a few hemp questions, and then I thought, then again, maybe not.
I mean, honestly, this attorney that I work with named Shelly, she is like the go-to for all, Shelly, Kim, but like she is the go-to for all hemp topics. I promise you there. But a friend of ours was telling us yesterday that they are opening a venue in Tennessee that does serve Delta 9 and other hemp-related products and alcohol. They are somehow managing with the licensing and legislation there. They're allowing it, and so that's very surprising to me.
Tennessee, guys, let's go.
I know. I'm really surprised that they're doing it, and I'm very interested to see how that business model is going to roll out. And in fact, I can always make that introduction for you, and that could be a topic that you have on a future show. But that part of it's really interesting, and especially in Tennessee, which I've never really taken to be a a super liberal state
Liberal
in
place.
reference to change. And
No.
so this is something that I find to be really surprising. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm sure people would love to hear about that. It'll be interesting to see, and I think it just in general, everything we're doing in this space is all like, what is your risk appetite? And so these people in Tennessee, I guess they're
going for it.
They're leaning in. I love it. I love it. Well, all right. So we're just about out of time here. I always love to try and end on a high note. So,
Cute.
what? Love a little play on words. I've been teaching my 6-year-old like different what that means, and
Yeah.
but we're getting there. We're getting there. Tell us what is in store for the artistry in 2025. What are your expansion plans or your next upcoming event? Something exciting and uplifting. Although I think in general this topic is an exciting one. It isn't one of those sort of like doom and gloom topics. It's a really fun thing to talk about. I think Courtney had to jump here. So Lauren, close us out here with, what can we look forward to next year for the artistry?
Yeah. So first, I just wanted to say, because I know we talked about a lot of the, challenges of consumption lounges and those problems, but I think what people should take away is that consumption lounges are here, and you might not have even tried one yet, but it's really crucial for the normalization of cannabis and for it to be viewed as really an extension of mainstream culture, for lounges to exist and, for people to come and see them. And I think that, we're really excited to be part of that movement where we're able to show people, look, this is a public space. It's a nice venue. It's somewhere where anyone can come and hang out, and doesn't even have to be for cannabis consumers specifically, but the focus doesn't have to just be about weed. Like, you can do a lot here. We have events, you can work on your screenplay here. But come check out a cannabis lounge, and there's a lot of other great ones in the West Hollywood area. But we're making progress. It's slow, but this new bill that's going to go into effect is definitely a step forward, and hopefully that will encourage a lot of cities in the state to now allow lounges to exist where they don't already. For the artistry, we recently opened Hawthorne. It's our newest location. It's right by LAX. So anyone that's in the South Bay or flying into LAX, come check us out. We have a great retail shop and a lounge area there. And we're doing a lot of events there, as well as in West Hollywood, like comedy nights, and the paint classes are my favorite events. And we also have a couple new retail spaces coming online in 2025. So we have a new store being built in Fresno and in Riverside, and those will be our second locations in both of those cities. So we're excited about that, and we're looking for other places in California and beyond where we can expand.
Beautiful. Real quick too, for any artists that are tuning in, like I am not an artist in any way, shape, or form. But how would an artist get in touch with you if they wanted to look into displaying their work? I think that
I'm so glad you asked that, because we need artists. So we're always looking for artists. And in particular, we're having a hard time now finding them in our Fresno area and Riverside. But we're looking for artists all across California. So if you go to theartistry.com/artists/apply, or you can figure out how to get there if you just get to our website. There's a form where you can apply to show your art. And like I said earlier, we don't take any commission from artwork sales. So all of the sales of any art would go directly back to you as an artist. And we change the art every 3 to 4 months at all of our stores. So we're always looking for new artists. So we would love to get more art submissions.
It's really such a beautiful concept. I love it. And I myself have not been to either of your locations, your consumption lounge locations. So that's on my 2025 bucket list for sure. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know Courtney had to jump, but she says goodbye and thank you as well. So thank you, Lauren. This has been a really delightful, lovely conversation. Everyone, please check out the artistry if you haven't. It is really a special, unique concept. And until next time, thanks so much.
Thank you.